Members of the commission, we are now live.
Good evening and welcome to the September 18, 2024 meeting of the Montgomery County Historic Preservation Commission. My name is Bob Sutton. I'm the chair, and I would like to begin by having commission members and staff introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Mark Dominiani.
Jeffrey Haynes.
Karen Burdett.
Julie Pelletier.
Commissioner Dolman.
Michael Galway.
Laura Nasser.
Laura DiPasquale, Historic Preservation Staff.
Dan Bruckert, Historic Preservation Staff.
Rebecca Ballo, Historic Preservation Staff.
Thank you. The first item of our agenda tonight are historic area work permits. Have they been duly advertised?
Yes, Chair Sutton, they were advertised in the September 4th edition of the Washington Times.
Thank you. If anyone is here to testify on any of the cases and you have not given a form to the staff, if you could do that at this point, that would be great. So we will start by projects that we believe can be expedited. And they, I will read them off to you. There are only a couple tonight. What's this? Yeah, right. Item number 1C at 17 West Irving Street in Chevy Chase, and 1D at 13 Grafton Street, Chevy Chase.
Mr. Chair, hearing no objections, I move that we approve the following historic area work permits in accordance with the staff reports based upon the record before us, in consideration of the recommendations of the local advisory panels and including any conditions recommended by staff. HOP number 1064778, a revision at 17 West Irving Street, Chevy Chase, and HOP number 1063896, a revision at 13 Grafton Street, Chevy Chase.
Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Haynes. I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you very much. These have been approved. We appreciate the work you've done to get them into shape so that we can easily approve them. The next item on our agenda is a preliminary consultation. This is item number 2A, postponed from the 4th of September. And this is at 23343 Frederick Road in Clarksburg. Is there a staff report?
Yes, Chair Sutton, there is a staff report. Again, this is Rebecca Ballo for the record, presenting this preliminary consultation, case 2A at 23343 Frederick Road in Clarksburg. So to go over briefly the background and standards of review, this property is noted in the Clarksburg Historic District designation as a contributing parcel in the historic district. I would also note that it is undeveloped. Clarksburg does not have the same standards that, for example, the Brookville Historic District does, where it has spatial resources as a category on its own. This was categorized as contributing, even though there are no structures, and this is an unimproved parcel within the district. So the standards of review are the Montgomery County Code, Chapter 24A, the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and the Vision of Clarksburg, a long-range preservation plan. I'm going to get into some of the specifics from the Vision of Clarksburg before we get into the proposal itself. So the vision was adopted in 1992, around the same time that the visions of Kensington and Hyattstown were also adopted. So these are mentioned in your bylaws to be held to the same standards as the design guidelines. So the Vision of Clarksburg talks about the town as being characterized by the linear course of Frederick Road as it goes through the town, and the location of the primary resources within the district are approximately 130 feet from each other, though that can really vary widely. But the town is characterized by these regularly spaced residential lots. And the character of the district is primarily residential, although commercial structures, both historically commercial ones and new buildings that are used for commercial purposes, are intermingled with the residential properties, creating a unified streetscape. The location of the religious property, the church to the north on Spire Street, and the educational structures off the main road, the Clarksburg School, and other structures that are set further back from the street help to strengthen this sort of lateral residential rhythm of the historic streetscape. And the vision of Clarksburg has many different criteria to go through. Each of these are detailed in your staff report, so I'm not going to go through them as part of the presentation. But when we get to the end and the conversation with the applicant, I am going to ask if the HPC could touch on a number of these issues in terms of the appropriateness of the proposal. So the subject property is an irregularly shaped lot that measures 6,559 square feet with frontage on Frederick Road near the intersection with Clarksburg Square Road and Spire Street. The vacant lot is located between the circa 1860 building at 23345 Frederick Road to the west, that's the yellow building, and the circa 1842 building to the east at 23341 Frederick Road. The landscape consists of gravel and grass with trees and bushes along the perimeter. A driveway currently extends through the property to access the adjacent property to the west at 23345, but no easement is recorded in the land records for egress. I'm going to touch briefly on the zoning ordinance requirements in this section of Clarksburg. So per the zoning ordinance, any new building will need to be set back no more than 20 feet from the front lot line, and at least 70% of the building must be within 20 feet of this front lot line. Within 20 feet of that line. So there are no side or rear yard setbacks within the zone. Properties can have a 0 setback from the side and the rear. 10% of the property must be left in open space. Parking must be located behind the front wall plane of any new building and cannot be located between the front wall plane and Frederick Road. The applicant proposes to construct a new 2-story primary building or structure on the vacant lot to serve an automobile-oriented business. The new 2-story building measures approximately 20 feet wide by 40 feet in length and is designed as a single dwelling with a modest full-width front porch supported by 3 posts. The building is proposed to be constructed on a concrete slab foundation. The facade is characterized by an off-center front door with 2 windows on the first floor and 2 on the second floor. The building features punched window openings on all elevations, standing seam metal roofs for the porch and main building, and horizontal siding of a yet-to-be-determined material. Window and door materials, porch flooring materials, and trim materials, I believe, are also undetermined at this time. The building is proposed to be located on the northernmost lot line and no more than 20 feet setback from the right-of-way of Maryland 355 or Frederick Road. 2 trees are proposed to be removed to allow the building to be sited against this lot line. The applicant is proposing ingress-egress access to the rear of the property via the existing curb cut off of Frederick Road. So this exhibit was submitted by the applicant. I added the red box over where the proposed building footprint had been drawn in pen. This is schematic in nature. This is really the purpose of the preliminary consultations, to give the HPC enough information just to comment generally on whether or not the siting is appropriate. Again, these 2 trees are proposed to be removed. The applicant is proposing to remove the 27-inch DBH black locust and the 20-inch DBH silver maple tree, both of which are covered in ivy. And there is an arborist report that was attached with the applicant's presentation for you to review. So staff preliminarily supports the concept design and placement for the new building. Excuse me. In general, the proposal looks towards the design, form, size, scale, setbacks, and materials of the existing commercial buildings in the district for its direction. There are other examples that are in the staff report located at Frederick Road, 2 other contributing buildings at 23335 and 23329 that measure, each of them measures 1.5 stories tall. They're each set back approximately 15 to 20 feet from the right-of-way, feature similar gable roofs, have a similar siding orientation, similar type of punched window openings, et cetera. These are some of the examples. So these are, on the left, The ones at 23335 and 23329 are historic buildings. The one at 23341 is also a historic building. That's the one, again, that is just to the right side, adjacent to this lot. And then 23315 Frederick Road is a newer, constructed in the last 15 years, infill building within the district. So staff also supports the siting of this building on the property line or within about 1 foot of it to allow for egress to the rear of the lot without crossing onto the adjacent property, as seems to be the case with the current access. This lot is unusually narrow for the district. Going back to the earlier map from the vision of Clarksburg, the lots tend to be much more generously sized than this one. Therefore, it's particularly it's tricky to sort of get the siting of the house correct. So staff would be really interested in the HPC's feedback on that. Staff supports where the applicant has it, again, to allow for, a 20-foot driveway to go to the back of the lot. Otherwise, it might be really difficult to access the entire property, and parking is just not feasible on Maryland 355. That's a state road. It's a high-traffic area, so there needs to be some access for vehicles to the back of the lot. So for items to include in the Reed submission, we need a written description of the project, a detailed site plan noting all the proposed setbacks, amended plans and elevations showing all dimensions, floor-to-floor heights, material specs for all items, and a letter of approval from the property owner, if not the applicant. It may just be that the SDAT has not been updated, but the last entry we have from SDAT from July shows that the lot is owned by Montgomery County, so we just need some updated documentation about that. And I do want to go back really quickly. Another item that staff wanted to talk about going through all of these, the last bullet item I think is particularly important, again, looking for your feedback about the fenestration size. Staff thinks that the pattern is largely consistent. It really resembles the Durwood store, with what the applicant is trying to do. It's trying to resemble these sort of vernacular, rural, country stores in the aspect of the building. What it's used for could be any number of things. But the sizing of the windows seems to be too small. And looking at this new infill example at 23315 Frederick Road on the right, you can see that the windows are just taller with this 2/2 aspect to them. And going back to what the applicant has proposed, this is more similar to what we saw the first or second time around with the Durwood store, and the comments were consistent that the window openings just needed to be made larger, either a 6/6 or a 2/2. Staff I kind of think that a 2/2 might be more appropriate for this district, and with the time period that this building is trying to emulate, and I also think that a clad window would be appropriate here for this new infill construction, as would a smooth, hardy plank siding or a modern material. Certainly doesn't have to be wood. And additionally, staff made the note in the report that the posts don't need to be particularly anything fancy, but maybe like a chamfered post or just something with a little more detail to it, so it doesn't just look like a 6x6 out there. So looking at these small details as part of the next submission would be staff's recommendation, and we'd ask for your comments on that as well. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Doman.
Yes, this is Commissioner Dolman. Thank you for the report. It was very inclusive, a lot of information. In fact, I had some questions, and you answered a lot of my questions. I assume this is going to be a commercial property. Now, maybe I'm addressing it to you, but maybe it'd be better to the applicant. But the way this appears to me, that if it's a commercial establishment, there have to be customers coming up to the property. And as it stands right now, you cannot park in front of the building. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So then they have to drive to the back of the property. And that 20-foot driveway, apparently that's enough to get them to the back of the of this new establishment that's coming in. So once they get back there, can they then go back out the the easement that appears in the, or is that something else, again, the applicant would have to answer?
I would definitely address that to the applicant. My answer is that there is no ingress, egress easement on file that we can find in the land records allowing this lot to have the right of entry to any other property. So presumably, they come in off of, customers or anybody comes in off of Frederick Road, Maryland 355, and they got to come back out the same way.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Commissioner Burdett.
Speaking kind of in the same vein, looking at the aerial with the lot laid out, are there any other properties that require an easement across the subject property?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And the largest building just immediately to the right of the property, that is owned by the person who's going to be developing this lot?
I do not know the ownership disposition of any of the adjacent properties, but I would ask the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you. I have Mr. Sherman Wells. I believe it must be you because you're if you could come up to the table, sir, and get in front of one of the microphones, and there's a button there that you can push to start it up. You can do a presentation that would last for 7 minutes. You can do a presentation, answer questions, whatever your preference is, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherwin Wells. I'm the president of Help America, Inc. It's a nonprofit in Maryland since 2002. My experience, I've worked with car dealerships, and I've seen, customers come in and they're looking for an inexpensive used car for their family member, new driver under $10,000, and there's nothing like that. So I saw this property. I'm also a real estate agent in the state of Maryland. I sold the 23345 Frederick Road, that yellow house, in June. And this lot, I saw the owner own both. So after he sold that, I asked him if I can get this lot to purchase from him to do some type of commercial activity. So I have a lease on the property for a year already. So I control the use of the property. And I want to take it a step further now to put a structure on it so I can get it approved for a used car lot, so I can, retail cars. But when I was speaking to staff about what could be put there, I just wanted to put those little shed, you just drop it on the property and use it as an office. They said it has to conform to the historic district. So we worked and got this 2-story structure, but it's like a house. So the bottom level would be used for the commercial enterprise because it's 2 levels. And I was looking to do the top as residential. So it's going to be residential, commercial. But most part, the bottom level will be used for customers to come in and sign their paperwork. Just according to the MVA, just need a desk, lock-in file cabinet, chairs, office space, has to have its own heat. And obviously, you want to put a restroom in there if the customer needs to use the restroom at the bottom level and use that as the used car office. The windows, for a dealership to look like a house and you can't see the lot, that's something that, we can go back and forth and try to see how we can expand the windows, at least on the bottom level, so you can see the lot and it looks somehow like a used car sales office, and then it still has to conform with the historic district. So it's a little tricky, but I'm willing to work with the historic district and see how we can get this done. I'm open to, making the windows bigger, whatever we have to do to get that done. So this lot, the owner doesn't own the 23345 anymore, and the 23341 is owned by the owner of the Clarksburg Market. So all 3 lots have different ownership. Ingress and egress would be from the 355 in the existing driveway that you saw in the pictures. So they would come in. They said there's no parking to the front, which I've never seen a dealership with no cars advertised in the front. But unless I can get an exception for that, an exception to cite the building a little further, and because if you're driving on 355 and you see a used car lot, at least 1 or 2 cars are displayed in the front with a for sale sign in it and the price to make you want to say, hey, let me go check out this used car lot. But if everything is in the back, you just have a house with a sign saying used cars or something, no cars to see, and you go past, you might not even go up the driveway to see what cars are in the back. So, I mean, I'm just here to, work with the Historic Commission to see what could be done, what exceptions could be made. This is an irregular shaped lot, and I believe in exceptions to every rule. But again, the Historic District has the final say. Montgomery County is wide, the road is being widened, I guess it's a state highway roads, but 355 is being widened. And Montgomery County took an easement from the property owner, 40 feet wide by about 10 feet and 419 square feet. This was recently done in July. And the issue is the transfer office saw that 419 square foot easement, 40 feet on the road and about 10 feet in, and they recorded it as Montgomery County owned the lot rather than they just took an easement for the 40 feet by 10 feet in the front to widen 355. So I already contacted them and they're working on resolving the ownership issue, but the owner, I already have the lease in place for a year. And I told him I needed either permission from him or transfer the property and, to me, or give me a letter saying I have permission to develop it, which he said, whatever document the commission needs, just present it to him and he'll sign it. So we're okay with that. It's just, how do I put a used car, because there's a lot of zone commercial residential town, CRT, which is unique. It allows commercial and residential use of the property. Right now it's residential with just a driveway, but I'm proposing commercial residential use. So how do we put the windows in agreement with the historic district, the door, if we have to widen it or put a glass door, whatever it needs to be done, I'm willing to work with the commission on that. And then how do we display the vehicles, and if everything has to go to the back and nothing to the front according to the district without any exceptions, that's what I'm trying to see how we can get this done and provide inexpensive used cars for, the traveling public, Montgomery County, and everybody's looking for a used car, Maryland inspected under $10,000, which you can't find at the dealers. So that's some niche that I'm trying to fill. I've done my homework and tried to provide some kind of the building. It's not cheap to put that building. It's not like a shed where you can just go pick it up for $17,000. They drop it there, you put the electric to it, and then you have your office space. They said that's not allowed in the district. So you have to pretty much build a house in conformity with the historic buildings and then try to convert it to office for selling the used cars. And my estimate right now for that structure is about $130,000 without completing the inside. And we're a small nonprofit organization. We don't get grants or funding from anybody, so we're on a shoestring budget, and we're just trying to see how we can comply with the historic district rules and regulations and still provide inexpensive transportation for Montgomery County residents. And I'm able to answer any other questions.
Any
that,
questions for
staff
Mr.
may
Wells? I
have.
believe there were a couple that came up that you could probably help us with. Commissioner Doman?
Yes, Commissioner Doman, my question is, do you currently own this property?
So I have a lease to own agreement with the owner. So it started in June of this year.
Okay.
So it's already leased for the next year, and I have the option to purchase it before the end of the lease, which I've already exercised that, and I'm in the process of doing that right now.
So,
Right now, I don't own it, I lease it, so I have the right to use it for the next year, and I'm exercising the right to purchase it before the end of that lease, which is next year.
okay. I don't know what to say.
So right now, I do not own the lot. I have permission to use it by way of a lease for 1 year.
So if the HBC commissioners agree with the, I guess the requirements that there's no parking in front of the building, this kind of puts you out of business, doesn't it?
Not necessarily, they said you can't park in front of the building. So they asked for the site plan, so the engineer would have to get really creative in designing an ingress egress plus display of vehicles behind or in line with the 20-foot setback maximum, but not at the front of the building. So it's going to be tricky because according to code, I believe it's 16 feet you need for ingress egress. The building is 20 feet, so that's 36 feet. So you have 4 feet left if you go with the minimum requirement for ingress egress. So if you do a slant, 4 feet slant display, they can see from the road. However, I was looking for some type of exception to at least put something in the front. And then they can, know something is there, and then the back would have extra so they can see more in the back. But
well,
I'm willing to work with the HPC, and whatever the HPC rules, my engineer gonna have to get creative and make it happen. That's why the building is,
Welcome to the conferencing center. At any time,
I think from talking to you, sound
if you need
agreeable to some of the recommendations from staff about windows and stuff, but you have a bigger problem about parking in the front, so that'd be the end of my questions.
no problem with the parking in the front. If the HPC says no parking in the front, like I said, the engineer would design no parking in the front of the building, but then there is parking that is allowed on the side, not all the way in the back. But I was proposing 20 feet for ingress egress and 20 feet for the building. So if the code only requires 16 feet for ingress egress, I can take that back and then use the 4 feet to have slanted vehicles, or I can condense the building from 20 feet to 18 feet wide by 42 feet long or 40 feet long still, and have the extra so all the vehicles won't have to be all the way in the back away from the road, so people can see at least something for sale.
This is Chair Sutton, and I believe I'm correct in saying that vehicles in the front of this building are not in our purview. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's a separate zoning
Yeah,
ordinance.
so we would not have any say in whether you could put them in the front or back or wherever. We're just concerned about the structure.
Right, and the structure, I'm willing to work with
Okay.
the commission.
Commissioner Burdett, I believe, had a question for you.
You mentioned that you're looking at, this will be a two-story structure and you're discussing doing residential. Now, whoever lives on however the residential sorted out in this building, they're going to need parking as well. They're going to need to be able to get into the building, which means some type of porch. And depending on how big this property is, they probably, if they have kids or something, they're going to want a green space out back or a patio or a deck or something.
It'll probably be me.
Oh, it'll be, well, so you also need to consider how this residence lays out in this building so that you have a decent place to live with appropriate code compliant egress and windows that are big enough that you may not have a view of much other than cars, but at least there's light coming in. But then also think about how the residential portion stacks in the building as opposed to thinking upstairs, downstairs. You may want to look at this a little bit differently when you lay out that residential aspect. But also, one other question I have is, you're going to be dealing with used cars. Do you need to have a garage on the property to do fix-up?
No.
None
So,
at all? Okay.
The property is only zoned for used car sales, not used car repairs. To do used car repairs, you need 20,000 square feet. Since this is less than that, only used car sales will be conducted there. There will be no repairs done. All the repairs will be done at the mechanic and the inspector, which the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, to get the dealer license, you have to have an agreement with the state license inspector to do all your inspections. So you just bring in the vehicle, displaying them and selling them, no repairs on the lot, unless you have the 20,000 square feet. Then you can have the auto sales and the garage for the auto repair, but we already looked into that, and you need 20,000 square feet. That won't be going on the property, so it'll just be display and sales.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Thank you. I got two questions. One, what are you doing now? Because I drove by and I noticed all the cars
Right, so
on
they
the lot.
just,
Do you just walk around and like, how
So-
do you do your deals now?
so the property is zone residential. So all those vehicles, they are in my name, or my organization name, insurance, tags. Unless you're a dealer, you cannot have vehicles without tags on them. So all those vehicles, they have insurance and tags in my name and my organization's name. I'm
Okay,
a veteran, so I have insurance and tags on them. So if somebody wants it, it's residential. They call me, I meet them, I take them on a test drive, it's my
I see,
car.
okay.
And
okay.
then they like it, we go to the tag and title, do the transfer, and
So you
it's-
just sort of sit them there, it's like you're parking your own personal vehicles?
they,
and
they
then-
are my personal
Well, yeah,
vehicles.
and then if
somebody
somebody
see
wants
it,
to
they
buy
call
one,
me.
right.
There's a number to call. I meet them. We go for a test drive. It's got tags. It's got insurance. And until I get this approval, I got to find a way to help the people. The name of my organization is Help America, and we got to find a way.
Okay. And my other question is, how did you decide on the size of the house? Is there, I'm not that familiar with the
Right.
local zoning. Is there a minimum?
So there's no
Size?
minimum or maximum. What I looked at as a real estate agent is the lot features, 40 feet wide by 165 feet long. I called a surveyor to survey the property, and he surveyed it and told me where my points are. Once I find that out, I was in contact with the zoning, because the CRT zone, there's several different, variations of it. This one, 50% of the property could be developed. However, within the historic commission, it has to be in line with everybody else. And I wanted to put, 24 by 40 structure. But then when I looked at the ingress egress at 16, it's gonna come close. And I gotta be on the far left lot line because there's no side setbacks. I'll be on the lot line and then exact 16 feet for the ingress egress. So I said, no, let me make the building smaller, 20, and then I have extra 20, so I can play around with the front and have the ingress egress. So it was a lot of variations going on, and yet still, if I have to go 18 to get 22 instead of 20, the builder is telling me I can do it. It's gonna be something new, but they can do it, so it's just what materials on the exterior, because at first it was vinyl, then we went to the wood lap siding, but that wood, it rots. You gotta keep painting it, so I wanted something more permanent, and understand there's composite wood, which is some type of synthetic something that you don't have to keep painting, and that's what I'm looking for, but then the cost keeps going up. So now I have to find some investor to get me $200,000, because $130,000 is just for that outside shell. And then I have to do the inside, the plumbing, electrical, drywall, toilet, bath, layout, everything. So it's probably gonna be close to $200,000. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I believe that, you're doing it for the good, to help the people, and somehow, some way, it's gonna happen.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. What we will do is, we're going to discuss the project, give you our feedback, what we think is important, so that when you come before us with a historic area work permit, we will be able to hopefully easily be able to approve it. Now, we'll give you suggestions. You're not required to take our suggestions. Usually it's not a bad idea, because it'll be coming for us before, but we will give you our feedback. And is with that, would anyone like to start off with this? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Galway.
Good evening, this is Commissioner Galway. I'm sympathetic to the issue of not being able to park cars in front of the building, and I understand how that's important to the ability to sell the cars. If I look back in history, after the turn of the century, there were things called auto showrooms where you actually had the Model Ts and the old Fords and so forth actually in a showroom where folks would go into the building to take a look. And I think it's worth taking a look at that and say, would it make sense, rather than design a home, which is essentially what you've done, and try to make it somehow look appealing to people who are interested in buying autos, maybe it becomes still in character with the neighborhood, still of historic, nature, but maybe it's a glass front with a couple autos in the showroom and make it look, inviting from that standpoint. And then you could still, and it's not unusual in these old buildings for the industry, whatever it might have been, to be on the first floor, and you have the living residence above, particularly if you're considering living in it yourself, and so I think that's something that you might be able to kill two birds with one stone. You might be able to get the visibility of what you're trying to do in terms of the showroom. And I could just see, a glass with a nice wood frame door and, with a little door, bell on the door as somebody comes. I mean, you could make it really spectacular. And so I think maybe that's something you might want to look at as you go forward. Thank you.
I'm open to that suggestion as long as I can find a way, because there's nothing in the district that resembles that. So I was just looking at, okay, let me see what's to the left of me, what's to the right of me, what's across the street. And it's just houses that the individuals applied for a use and occupancy of the commercial structure and put in the different things. So across the street is residential, except for the psychic, which is residential/psychic. And then on this side, it's just houses, and there's nothing like a car dealership in any direction that I can, because if I can just put a glass window enclosed showroom and the office lock-in filing cabinet, I'll do that, because it's not gonna be the cost like a $200,000 house to use the bottom for the operation. I live in Gaithersburg, so I'm only 10, 15 minutes away, so it's not necessarily I have to put a residential structure there, but to get something approved with the least amount of, financial output to get it done, that's my main thing. So I'm open to that suggestion as well, as long as I
Understand,
can
thanks.
get
And you might
something
want to
from
work with
staff.
staff, and
Yeah,
because
to
they
get
may-
something like that, and maybe one level, just a showroom.
I mean, the old gas station's another example. You had the overhang, and you had the doors set back, and, had glass, and
The
the
closest
old
thing-
stores and those kinds of things.
The closest thing I
oftentimes.
saw was the old post office, which is like a brick structure with a lot of glass on it. But I don't know if I can put something like that there with the glass showroom. If I can, I'm willing to work with the
Just a
staff on
suggestion,
design.
just something to consider.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Burdett?
I think Commissioner Galway's on the right path with this. You do need to think outside the box, but the original car dealerships were inside, or with the old gas station, they had an awning out front, and the building was pushed back a bit. With an overhead door in the side of the structure, you can easily get the cars in and out.
That was my first submission,
Yeah.
was the single car garage with the garage door. And it was denied, and it was said that there's no property in the historic district with the garage door,
Well, I think what you're
and
going
then
to be,
deciding.
you're going to be hiding the door or kind of masquerading the door. The door's not going to be on the front of the building, it's going to be on the side, and you're going to have a door and windows on the front. And again, the style of the building needs to be early 20th century, but it may not need to be 1880s. It can be 1920s, maybe even a 1930s commercial structure. And it can still have a residential component that's pushed, again, to the back of the structure and stacked, so that the front is purely just this commercial. But again, getting cars, that would give you a view that people driving past, you could see through and see this cars. I mean, that's all how all the old car dealerships were. We all think of them as kind of mid-century kind of look, but they were older than that, and quite a few buildings that are quite valuable now in downtown DC, especially around the DuPont area. A lot of those stores and restaurants were once car dealerships, the ones with the brick. So think about that. Think about how to use an overhead door on the side of the building just to get, or even barn doors that pull to the side to get the car in, get the car out, and the rest of the cars in the back. the rest of them. But just keep in mind, even if you're living there, that residence needs to pass the code requirements for occupancy and egress and light and the rest of it. So, but it's an interesting problem.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Commissioner Pelletier?
I kind of wanted to comment on the building that's presented. I think, I agree with staff that, I think you're on the right track. If you didn't want to redesign and think of this more, I think these are good ideas. I just sometimes question how much money you have to design this thing. So I think you're on the right track as far as the house form goes, but it needs details. And it looks like what you submitted was sort of a schematic. But like what they were talking about with the columns, I think you could do more with the front porch, make the windows bigger, that kind of thing. But I think the general form of what you're showing is compatible with the neighborhood, just driving around. My issue is more that it's so close to the house next door, but there's nothing in the zoning that keeps you from doing that.
Zero
So
side
that's not
setback.
really my purview. But I think if you had something like that with a big front porch, a welcoming front porch, and a sign for your business, I don't know what the signage code is in that part of the county, but I just think we need more information about the structure that you're showing, like the materials. I think the bigger windows is a good idea, maybe bigger overhangs on the roof, some nicer columns on the front porch, that kind of thing. I think it would fit in with its surroundings pretty well. So that's kind of my take, is that you're on the right track. We just need some more details. So I would work with staff to, show them what materials you're using, et cetera. But it's definitely a quandary for, how you want to use this property. So good luck with it.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Haynes?
I'll just concur with what the fellow commissioners have said. I think you want to, and sort of summarize a few points on the front, taller, larger windows. I mean, the neighbor to the right has windows on the ground floor that's probably at least, I'm going to bet they're 5 feet tall. So you want to get more glass on the front. I like the barn door idea on the side. Maybe you squeeze it down to 18 so you can still have some cars on the side, as you said before. There's nothing to say that maybe the porch comes and, I was going to suggest wrapping it back, but that takes space to do. But you could cantilever the second floor over. If you needed more width on the second floor, you could even cantilever over the first floor to get some width up there. But I think you should do another round of development and come back for a second preliminary review.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Chair Sutton?
Yes.
I just wanted to add a little bit of background information for the commissioners. Normally, I don't go into this level of detail with land development for you all when we're talking really about architectural form, but seeing how the conversation has gone, I think it will be helpful just to add some additional information and the back and forth that I've had with Mr. Wells and also with my colleagues who work in zoning and land development. We're referring to this as a lot. It's an unplatted parcel. So in Montgomery County, in order to pull a building permit for most unplatted parcel, you need to plat the lot in order to pull a building permit. However, Mr. Wells is working with our staff to send information to planning to obtain an exemption from platting letter based on the date of the lot, and also talking about an idea. You can go from a residential structure, like if a structure is used as a residence, which a lot of these ones in Clarksburg have been, and a lot of these structures in Clarksburg are on unplatted lots. They're just on parcels with historic residences. You can change that historic residence to a commercial use without platting. So some of the discussion has been designing this to give the that it is a residence, it is a residential structure that then will be converted to a commercial use, thereby it won't have to go through the administrative subdivision process at the planning board with many thousands of dollars attached to that for the platting. Additionally, you are not permitted in Montgomery County you can't have an accessory structure on a lot without a primary structure. So a lot of the initial conversations with Mr. Wells talking about putting a shed or a garage or something, that would meet the minimal needs for the business. You can't have a garage or a shed, you have to have a building, something that it qualifies as a primary structure on the lot, and then you can have accessory structures to your primary. So it's a little bit in the weeds, but again, seeing how some of the discussion and some of these really great ideas, makes me think of Bonfield's garage, for example, that has these large sort of barn door openings in the front of it. That's 1920s auto-oriented buildings, auto garage, where you could have more visibility for the automobiles, but that's why we didn't go in sort of a purely commercial direction with the design of this. It needs to retain some aspect as appearing as if it is a residential structure in a lot of its aspects, which Bonfield's also, I think, does as well, even with those double doors and those large glass windows in the front. So I'm giving you this background too, so that when it comes back, you understand some of these other discussions that we're having to land on something that Mr. Wells can get through permitting.
Thank you. Commissioner Pelletier, question for staff or for Mr. Wells?
Staff, I
Can you need to turn on your...
Staff, I think. Well, sort of for both. Is it a possibility to build a single-family home for renting out and then build a shed where he could actually have his business office? So he could get sort of two forms of income from the property? Because it is zoned for residential and commercial, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I know it would sort of take up a parking space for your used cars.
I was proposing putting the 20 by 40 structure on the lot line and then to the back of the property, because it's 42 feet wide all the way in the back, put in the structure facing the road, and that's when I was told it has to be 20 feet from the road. So I said, okay, I want to put the cars in the front and put the building in the back. But they said, no, you can't have an accessory structure without a primary structure. So that's how I came to this.
Right.
To put this.
I was
So
just
now
thinking
I
you
can do a
could-
second structure in the back.
Right, I'm just thinking you could build a house and you could rent it out and you could make money off of that, and then you could build a shed in the back and that could be your office for your cars, and you could.
I'm moving onto the property as a single family. I got a townhouse. I think I need the biggest space, and then I'll be right there next to the business to help the people.
I was thinking
So
you could
I'm
rent it out to
gonna-
somebody else.
I won't rent it. They'll rent my townhouse. I'm gonna live on the property for single family, and then if I can put, like, we were talking about the building in the back for the business with the
Right,
glass.
right.
And then have the cars away from the
And you
road,
won't have any
that
room
will
for
work.
cars, but anyway, I was just curious if that's.
In general, I do believe one could. I am not familiar with all the provisions of this zone.
Right.
But similar to how a property has a principal primary structure and then accessory structures, there's also the principal use of a property, and then other uses are then accessory to
that use.
to that use.
Yeah, that
Now,
bothers me.
residential is allowed pretty much in all of the zones except the industrial zones, whereas commercial is excluded from residential zones, but this is a commercial residential
Okay.
zone.
I
So
was just
maybe-
curious. I was just
maybe.
curious. Just a suggestion.
I think I'm gonna take your suggestion and put the house there and then put the garage structure in the back with the glass facing the road all the way to the back. So then the cars, if they're in the back, they'll still see and use that as the office instead of the house. So that's a
Thank you.
good suggestion.
Any other comments, questions?
I have a question for staff. So
Commissioner Burdett?
for staff, we're kind of getting fixated on the little wood building with the porch in front. But if we think more of a two-story brick building with the house, with the residence on the flat, on the second floor flat, which was very common all over the county. It's just a different look than what is surrounding it. Are we restricted to the appearance of the surrounding buildings, or can we get more of the era of the buildings, which would include a 1920s brick storefront with an apartment on top?
So particular to Clarksburg, brick, I think there's only one brick building in the district, and I think it's the post office.
Okay.
So the materiality of the building would need to be this horizontal siding. It would need to be not wood, but it could be a hardy plank or something like that. A brick building would be entirely uncharacteristic for Clarksburg, which is interesting because just up the road in Hyattstown, you do have several brick buildings, but the design guidelines are really specific about that aspect of the materiality. And the tradition for the infill houses that face the road, or the infill buildings, is to have them look more or less like late 19th, early 20th century vernacular residences. Now, the HPC did take a different approach with the daycare building at Hammer Hill, with all the considerations that it was many hundreds of feet back from the road, and that was designed to be a modern take on an agricultural outbuilding in a very loose, I think, modern sense of it, but was very successfully done, but that's not highly visible. And the vision of Clarksburg, when it talks about these buildings that are going to be fronting right on Frederick Road, that maintaining the rhythm and the spacing and that kind of look in the district of the 1880s to 1920s is particularly important here. So again, Bonfields was built in 1920s. That's an auto, or it was a garage. So that's another direction to take with it, a take on a gas station, even though there was not that kind of gas station in Clarksburg, and having it be compatible yet modern. That's something to work. That could work. A proposal such as that could work. If you remember, the gas station that we were looking at Stringtown Road, do you remember that before COVID, right on that corner lot with the day house? And the piece of it that was going to front onto Stringtown Road was designed to be this little one-story wood lap siding building, and that was going to be the cashier's area for the gas station, and then the pumps were way in the back off the road where you weren't going to see it, and that was found acceptable. So I think there's been demonstrated some leeway within Clarksburg, but it's actually not a place where the HPC has approved kind of real departures architecturally for the buildings that are on the road, and I don't think the design guidelines allow for that kind of latitude the way some other districts do.
I would just like to say that 23356 Frederick Road, which is right after the Psychic House, it's an all brick building. It's the only one right there, and it's for sale right now for $750,000, and it's all brick. So I was looking at that, saying if that's brick, instead of this, can I do a brick? But that's the only one in the district that is brick right adjacent to this lot.
Hey, anyone else? I think you have some good suggestions here. All of our comments are recorded. I would recommend working with staff to move on to the next level here. I think I can speak for everybody saying that we're excited for what you're doing. We think it's a wonderful project for a very, very good cause, and we're very anxious to work with you to make sure that this happens. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda, I believe we do not have tax credits tonight, is that correct?
That is correct, Chair Sutton.
Okay, minutes. Has anyone read the minutes, and is there a motion to approve the September 4th minutes?
This is Commissioner Dolman. But I also have one correction to be made on the minutes.
Okay.
Before
Well, first of all, do you make a motion to approve them?
Yes, I make a motion that we
Okay,
approve it.
and then your recommendation. If you wouldn't mind, could you give that to staff to make? Or is it?
It's very, very, very minor, but
If you could give it to staff, that would be great.
Yep, can you read it into the record for me, and then I'll take whatever you have marked up.
it's just under Item 3, Historic Preservation Tax Credit Group 7. It says Commissioner Dolman moves to approve Group 6. I believe that should be Group 7.
Yes.
But other than that, it's fine.
Great.
Thank you. I'll note that.
Perfect. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Burdett. I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. Are there any commission items? Are there any staff items?
No, Chair Sutton, I already gave an update on the HP work program for FY25 in our work session, and when leadership has determined our final FY26 budget request, then I will come back and brief the commission on that.
And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.